1980s were an eventful time in Chicago. That was when, among other things, the FBI finally managed to build a case against Albert Caesar Tocco, reportedly the big man in the Chicago outfit. Did Albert Tocco have any sort of finger in the municipal affairs of Chicago Heights?
From my perception, no. He was not interested. He was born, and I was about 2 blocks away from where he lived, so he was a couple of years older than me, and I knew him, and he knew me, of course, but he was, all the time as a little kid, I played basketball almost every day of my life at that time, and I used to play baseball and all that stuff in the schoolyard, and I could honestly say I never saw him in that kind of atmosphere, in that environment. So I really don't know what he was doing growing up.
But when you were indicted, together with your fellow commissioners Louise Marshall and John Liotoni, the media kept yammering on about some supposed connection with John Caesar Tocco, as if it were his trial. The three of you supposedly were somehow on the take, according to the government's star turncoat witness, another former commissioner, Nick LeBoux.
There was only two things that he was involved in with LeBoux, and that were two garbage deals. Okay, and he never talked. LeBoux said he got money from Tocco, but Tocco never said anything about me. He never talked about anything, and yet they indicted me on that. He had no corroboration of that particular crime. Okay. In fact, I think there were 13 counts against us, and there was no corroboration on any of them. Zero corroboration, and I could never forget. And I hope it's when we do the book and all that. In the closing argument, I think it was, I'm not sure which lawyer said, because we had a couple of lawyers. He said, and you will see that there was not one single contractor that testified against these guys. And this is really unusual, Bill, because they indicted three of us. I mean, if one of us would have hurt if they could trail to us, to any one of us, we would have all got it. Okay, that's why we should have been severed from the case. In other words, is it possible that the three guys that voted for the best thing in Chicago Heights history, and that's one of the things that we campaigned on, getting clean water, people drinking that sloppy, dirty water for 50 years, and every year they got promises from the politicians. And here we are, 5 council people at the time, and LeBoux was one of them, and another commissioner, Gene Sadis, was another one. So 5 of us. I think we made history, okay? The difference there is that 3 of us got indicted. LeBoux never got indicted, picked up $100,000 that he could never say we got any of it. And the prosecutor at that time, Gene Sadis, who was one of the council, was never called to testify. But we did interviews with him. He never laid a finger on us. He was perfect. He was a good man. We ended up on the opposite sides for some personal kind of reasons. But I think that the prosecutor even tried to include him some way, because he said stuff during the trial that included Sadis. And I don't believe the prosecutor. He was not very nice.
Did the public prosecutors ever bring a prima facie case, a case supported by hard evidence, by some kind of smoking gun, against any of the 3 accused?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I don't know if people listening to this right now understand what prima facie is, okay? Because if they had something like that, you've got to admit you're guilty. They never had anything like that.
During the 80s and 90s, the U.S. Justice Department spent millions and millions of taxpayer dollars prosecuting real or imagined corruption in local government. Did the white-collar rate actually change in response to all these prosecutions? Did it go up? Did it go down? Did it stay the same?
You know what, Bill? I'm glad you're asking a question like that because I'm not sure yet. I may be involved in in another trial, another book that's going to talk about that. And I don't really know that what I'm hearing is there have been some people have done research like that, but I'm not privy to that right now. But I'd have to guess as far as Chicago Heights is concerned, I really don't see what the impact was of all the money that they spent.
Many people say that you and your co-defendants were caught up in what had become a prosecution industry, that the object was not so much to do justice as to further the careers of lawyers and policemen in the public service. What do you think?
Well, there's no doubt about that because the U.S. attorney at that time was a fellow by the name of Fred Foreman, who is now a judge. He did okay. The prosecutor now works for a high-priced law firm. Not bad. He and Fred Foreman gave 7 people immunity in my trial. You realize what 7 people with immunity? You know what immunity is? It's a bribe. Okay? I mean, in fact, Napolitano, a former U.S. attorney in, I think he's on the channel Fox News or something like that, but he said basically that's what it is. It's a bribe.
Many prominent legal authorities would say that you were the victims of prosecutor misconduct, that the prosecutors failed to disclose all of their case against you, and that in so doing they broke the Brady rule, the rule that requires that the prosecution disclose any evidence existing that might favor or exonerate the accused. They didn't do that, did they? In fact, in the case of the water pipeline project, where the 3 accused supposedly had received kickback payments, did they not withhold FBI material that might have exonerated you?
We had stuff like that. We had a video. We had a tape recorded message that LeBeau was talking to one of the people who paid a bribe to him, and the 2 detectives or FBI guys, Bob Pecoraro, you know who you are in case you're listening, and O'Malley, he knows who he is. Okay, they got together with LeBeau and tried to get this guy to say something. So and LeBeau gets on the phone, about a 45 or 50-minute conversation. He said, "You know that money that you gave me?" And the guy said, "What money are you talking about?" He said, "You know that money you gave me and Chuck, or for Chuck, or whatever he said." I said, "What are you talking about? There's nothing there." So if you're familiar with a 302, they report that in a 302. Then we got the information on that. Plus, we got the tape. It was so phony, they didn't even play it to the jury. The jury never heard that. Well, we got a whole bunch of that, Bill. And I don't know how much you know about the water pipeline kickback, okay? We have the same thing, and how they do it is amazing with these 302s. A 302 is a report of when FBI is interviewing somebody. So they go to the people who paid the bribe to LeBeau, actually paid the bribe to LeBeau. And it's not hearsay, it isn't anything. And he said that the engineer said, and I don't want to mention names at this time, but it's because he's a beautiful person, said he gave LeBeau, he funneled, those are the words he used, he funneled $100,000 to LeBeau. And he got it from the people who were the contractors. Now, when you hear that, and when you read that, and you say, well, what's going to happen here? Well, the FBI then, or the prosecutor then says, they draw up a draft of what they're going to want this man to say to the grand jury. So the man is being honest. He said, I funneled $100,000 in the draft. And like a draft is what they're preparing to go to the grand jury. And I guess somebody didn't like that, so they crossed that out. And they said, well, what you got to say is you did 50 to 100,000. He must have said, well, no, I did 100,000, because later on he admitted it was 100,000. But the grand jury never heard that.